The courtroom was silent, so silent that even the sound of a pen dropping echoed across the marble floor. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at the young girl standing before him. She couldn't have been more than 17, her hands trembling slightly as she faced the man sitting across the room. Her father. "Miss Emily," the judge said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made the room hold its breath. "You do understand what you're asking this court to do?" Emily nodded once, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "I'm suing my father." Before we go deeper into this heart-wrenching story, make sure to subscribe to Sweet Justice, where we share true-to-life stories of compassion, conflict, and the moments that test our humanity. The father, Robert Hayes, leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight, his face unreadable, but the faint tremor in his hand betrayed the calm mask he tried to wear. He had built a life on being in control of his business, his reputation, and most painfully, his family. The courtroom audience murmured quietly. Even the bailiff looked unsettled. A daughter suing her own father. It wasn't just rare. It was unimaginable. "Tell me why, Emily," the judge finally said, leaning forward. "Why do you want to take your own father to court?" Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because he took something from me, Your Honor," she said. "Something that can never be replaced." The judge exhaled slowly, sensing that whatever she was about to say next would change everything. The echo of Emily's words lingered in the courtroom long after she spoke them. The judge quietly signaled a recess to regain order, but even as the room emptied, Robert Hayes sat unmoving, staring at the wooden table as if time itself had frozen. His daughter, his only child, taking him to court. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered, cameras clicked, and rumors spread faster than wildfire. But inside Emily's heart there was no noise, only the ache of years spent unheard. The Hayes household had once been filled with laughter, back when Claire, Emily's mother, was alive. She used to bake cookies on Sunday mornings and hum to the radio while folding laundry. The house smelled of cinnamon and safety, but that warmth had died the night Claire did. And with her, Robert's ability to feel. He buried himself in work, building his construction company into an empire. But at home, silence ruled. Every conversation turned into an argument, every question into an interrogation. Emily would come home from school to find him in his office, eyes glued to spreadsheets, ignoring the dinner she made for them both. "Did you do your homework?" was his idea of affection. "Yes," she'd answer, even when she hadn't. She missed her mother's soft voice, the one that reminded her she was loved even when she failed. Her father only reminded her of what she lacked, but deep down Emily believed that he wasn't cruel, just broken. And she tried everything to reach him. One night, she knocked on his office door holding a photo frame of their family, her dad and her mom smiling at the beach. "Dad," she said softly, "do you ever miss her?" Robert didn't look up. "Every day," he muttered, flipping a page of a contract. "Then why does it feel like you hate everything she loved?" He froze, his jaw clenched. "I don't have time for this, Emily." "You never have time," she said, voice trembling. "Not for me. Not for her memory. You just work and because someone has to," he snapped, slamming his pen down. "You think this roof pays for itself? You think grief puts food on the table?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I never asked for money, Dad, I just wanted you." But he'd already turned back to his desk. That night, Emily cried herself to sleep, clutching her mother's picture, not realizing that this argument was only the beginning of something much deeper. Weeks passed. The distance grew. One afternoon, while searching through old boxes in the attic, Emily found a worn-out folder labeled Claire Hayes, Last Will and Testament. She froze. Her mother's will? She remembered her mother telling her once, "No matter what happens, Emily, I've made sure you'll always have something to follow your dreams." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were papers, most of them official-looking with signatures and seals. But one line caught her eye. "I leave my savings account and personal jewelry to my daughter Emily Hayes to support her college education." Her heart raced. She looked for the signature and froze. Her mother's name didn't match. It was close, similar enough that most people wouldn't notice. But Emily knew her mother's handwriting like her own. She ran downstairs, her mind spinning, the folder clutched in her hand. "Dad!" she shouted, bursting into his office. "What is this?" Robert looked up from his laptop, his face instantly pale. "Where did you get that?" "The attic," she said. "Mom's will. But this signature, this isn't hers. You forged it, didn't you?" His voice turned low and cold. "You don't understand what you're talking about." "I understand enough," she cried. "You changed it, didn't you? You took what she left for me." He stood up, his shadow towering over her. "Emily, this conversation is over." "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's just beginning." That night, Emily packed a small bag and left home. She stayed with her best friend Lila, too hurt to go back, too proud to ask for help. Lila's parents offered kindness, something she hadn't felt in months, but Emily couldn't sleep. The thought that her own father had stolen her future haunted her. She tried calling him, and no answer. She sent a message. "Dad, please tell me the truth. Why would you do this?" No reply. A week later, she walked into a small law office downtown, her mother's folder still in her hands. The woman behind the desk, attorney Grace Miller, looked up curiously. "Can I help you?" Emily nodded, her voice shaky but determined. "Yes, I need to know if I can sue my father." Grace studied the documents carefully, her brow furrowing. The will looks tampered with," she said. "The signature's inconsistent and the notary stamp is faded. If this was changed after your mother's passing..." "That's fraud," Emily swallowed. "So, it's real? He really forged it?" Grace sighed. "I can't say for sure without verification. But if he did, then yes, you have grounds for a case." Emily's hands shook as she whispered, "I never wanted this. I just wanted him to tell the truth." Grace looked at her with empathy. "Then let's make sure he has to." The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. The news spread quickly, and teen sues her father over forged will. Some called her brave. Others called her heartless. Robert's colleagues whispered behind his back. His pride, the one thing he valued more than love, began to crack. He refused to speak to reporters, refused to speak to anyone, especially Emily. At night, he'd pour himself a drink and stare at her childhood photos torn between rage and regret. "How did we get here?" He'd whisper to the empty room, but every time he thought about apologizing, his ego whispered louder. "She betrayed you." The day before the hearing, Emily stood in front of the courthouse clutching her mother's locket. Grace stood beside her. "You ready?" The lawyer asked. Emily nodded. "I don't know if I'm ready to fight him, but I'm ready to tell the truth." As she stepped through the courtroom doors the next morning, her eyes met her father's. He looked older, heavier, as if the guilt had already begun its sentence. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This court is now in session." The gavel struck, a sound that felt like the start of war between blood and justice. The gavel's echo faded slowly, swallowed by the weight of silence that filled the courtroom. Everyone's eyes were on the two people seated at opposite ends, a father and daughter, once inseparable, now bound by a lawsuit. Judge Daniels adjusted his robe, his expression stern but sympathetic. He'd seen everything in his courtroom, greed, betrayal, injustice, but nothing quite like this. He cleared his throat. "Case number 3148, Emily Hayes versus Robert Hayes. Plaintiff, are you ready?" Attorney Grace Miller stood confidently. "Ready, Your Honor." "And the defense?" A tall, suited man rose from the other table. "Yes, Your Honor, Attorney James Cole for the defendant." Robert sat stiffly beside him, avoiding his daughter's gaze. His fingers fidgeted against the edge of the table, betraying the calm exterior he fought to maintain. "Very well," the judge said. "Let's begin opening statements." Grace stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Your Honor, this is not merely a financial dispute. This is a case of trust, the sacred trust between a father and his daughter broken by deceit." She turned toward the jury. "My client, Emily Hayes, is a 17-year-old girl who lost her mother far too early. Her mother, Claire Hayes, left a will to ensure her daughter's education and future were protected. But that will was allegedly altered, after Claire's death, by her husband, the defendant, Mr. Robert Hayes." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Grace continued, her voice unwavering. This isn't about money. It's about truth. It's about a young woman's right to her mother's final wishes, and her father's moral obligation to honor them. She glanced toward Emily, whose eyes shimmered with quiet pain. By the end of this trial, Grace said softly, you'll understand why Emily Hayes had no choice but to take her own father to court. The judge nodded. Thank you, Miss Miller. Defense may proceed. James Cole stood, his tone smooth and measured. Your Honor, this case is nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding. My client, Mr. Hayes, is a grieving widower, a man who made administrative changes to his late wife's will under the belief that it was in his family's best interest. He paced slowly. He didn't act out of greed, but confusion, and while the plaintiff's emotions are understandable, we must separate grief from guilt. Mr. Hayes is not a criminal. He is a father trying to manage his life and his daughter's future amidst unbearable loss. He returned to his seat. The courtroom stayed silent, the tension hanging like fog. Plaintiff, call your first witness, Judge Daniels instructed. Grace stood. The plaintiff calls Emily Hayes to the stand. Emily inhaled deeply and walked to the witness stand. Every step echoed, every glance felt like a spotlight on her heart. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Emily, Grace began gently. How old are you? 17. And who is the defendant? My father, Grace nodded. Emily, can you tell the court what your relationship with your father was like before your mother passed away? Emily's eyes softened with memory. He was different, kinder. My mom used to call him the rock of our family. They'd dance in the kitchen, argue playfully about recipes, laugh over burnt toast. I thought they were perfect. Her voice cracked slightly. But after Mom died, it was like he forgot how to love. He stopped talking, stopped eating with me. Everything became about work and money, Grace nodded. When did you first notice something was wrong with your mother's will? Emily held up the folder. I found it in our attic. The signature didn't look right. My mom always signed her name with a little heart next to it. This one didn't have that, and the ink looked newer. Did you confront your father? Yes, Emily said quietly. He didn't deny it. He just said, you don't understand, but how could I? My mom left that money for my college, for my future. And he took it. The defense attorney rose. Objection, Your Honor, speculation. There's no proof my client forged anything. Judge Daniels nodded. Sustained. Ms. Miller, state a factual testimony. Grace smiled faintly. Of course, Your Honor. She turned back to Emily. Emily, what did you do after that conversation? I left home. I couldn't stay there knowing he'd lied to me. Why bring this case forward now? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I still love him. But I can't pretend that what he did was okay. Her words struck something deep in the courtroom. Even Robert looked down, his shoulders slumped, guilt creeping into his silence. Grace turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit the original will as evidence. Proceed. She handed over the documents. Judge Daniels examined the papers carefully. Defense, any objections? James Cole shook his head. We'll review handwriting verification during testimony. Very well, the judge said. The documents will be entered into evidence. Grace turned back to her seat. No further questions, Your Honor. The defense rose. Emily, James began softly, I'm sure this has been very painful for you. She nodded cautiously. But you're aware, aren't you, that your father paid for your private schooling, your living expenses, your medical bills? Yes. So it's fair to say your father has supported you financially? Yes, but he cut her off gently. And this will you're referring to? Isn't it possible your mother might have discussed changing it with your father before she passed? Emily hesitated. I don't think so. But you don't know, do you? Her lips trembled. No, he smiled politely. No further questions. Emily stepped down, her heart pounding. She caught her father's eyes, and for the first time saw something she hadn't expected. Regret. Defense may call their witness, the judge said. James nodded. We call Mr. Robert Hayes to the stand. Robert slowly stood and took his oath. His usually confident posture looked uncertain now. Mr. Hayes, James began, please tell the court what motivated your changes to the will. Robert sighed. When Claire passed, everything fell apart. Emily was just a kid. I panicked. I thought, if I combined her inheritance with my accounts, I could manage it better until she was ready. I didn't mean to deceive her, I just didn't know how else to protect her. Grace stood. Mr. Hayes, did you inform your daughter about these changes? No. Did you seek legal approval to alter the will? Robert hesitated. No. Then how do you explain the forged signature? His eyes darted toward Emily and then down. I didn't forge it. Then who did? Grace asked firmly. I don't know, he stammered. Grace approached the bench, her voice calm but sharp. Mr. Hayes, this is your wife's will. Her final words. Are you telling this court you altered it, but didn't notice someone else forged her name? Robert's lips parted, but no words came. The courtroom fell dead silent. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. After a long pause, the judge leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, this is your opportunity to tell the truth. This is your daughter sitting across from you. What really happened? Robert's throat tightened. He blinked hard, his eyes wet. I thought I was doing the right thing, he whispered. I thought I was protecting her. But when I signed that paper, I knew. I knew it wasn't what Claire wanted. I just couldn't face losing control of everything. Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. The judge exhaled deeply. Control isn't love, Mr. Hayes, and protecting someone doesn't mean silencing their truth. Robert looked up at his daughter, a look of raw, unguarded remorse. I'm sorry, Emily, he said. I just didn't know how to be your father without her. The courtroom stayed still, the kind of silence that only heartbreak could create. The judge finally broke it. This court will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Until then, both parties are excused. The gavel struck. Emily stood frozen for a moment before slowly walking toward her father. They stopped only a few feet apart. Dad, she said softly, her voice trembling. I never wanted your money. I just wanted the truth, he nodded weakly. I know, and I wish I'd told it sooner. They didn't hug. They didn't speak again that night. But something between them, something that had been broken for years, finally began to mend, quietly, in the stillness between words. The next morning, the courtroom filled with a strange, heavy quiet. No reporters, no crowd noise, just a sense that something real was about to happen. Emily sat with her attorney, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her father sat a few tables away, eyes hollow from a night of no sleep. Judge Daniels entered, his expression unreadable, his mind weighed down by what he'd heard the previous day. He adjusted his glasses and nodded toward Grace. Counselor, you may proceed with your closing argument. Grace Miller rose and walked toward the jury box. Yesterday, she began softly, we heard a father admit that he altered his late wife's will. He said it was out of protection, out of fear. But what we must ask today is simple. Does fear excuse betrayal? She paused, her tone calm but piercing. Emily Hayes trusted her father. She believed he was her guardian, her protector. But trust is not just a word, it's a promise. And when a parent breaks that promise, it doesn't just hurt the heart. It breaks something far deeper, faith. Grace's voice softened. This case isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. A daughter isn't asking her father to suffer. She's asking him to acknowledge that what he did was wrong. Because without truth there can be no healing. She stepped back, her eyes glancing toward Emily with quiet reassurance. Justice, Your Honor, doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like honesty. Sometimes it looks like finally saying the words that should have been said years ago. She sat down. The judge turned. Mr. Cole, closing statement. James Cole stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, the defense does not dispute what happened. Mr. Hayes made a terrible decision, but the law recognizes intent. This was not a man trying to steal or harm his daughter. This was a father drowning in grief, making flawed choices while trying to protect the only person he had left. He looked toward Robert. My client is not innocent of mistakes, but he is not guilty of malice. If this court can find even a trace of compassion, then let that compassion guide your verdict. He returned to his seat, his voice lowering. Sometimes, Your Honor, mercy is the highest form of justice. The courtroom went still again. Judge Daniels folded his hands and looked down at the papers before him, though he wasn't really reading. He was thinking, not as a judge, but as a father. Finally, he looked up. Before I render my verdict, I want to hear from both parties, directly. Emily, Mr. Hayes, please stand. Both of them rose slowly. Emily, the judge said, You brought this case forward not for revenge, but for truth. If you could say one thing to your father right now, not as a plaintiff, but as his daughter, what would it be? Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I just want to understand why he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. I spent years thinking I wasn't worth honesty. I don't care about the money, Your Honor. I just wanted to know that my mom's memory, her words, still mattered to him. Her father's eyes watered. He looked at her, then at the judge. Your Honor, he said quietly, I deserve every bit of her anger. I did it because I was scared. After Claire died, I felt useless, helpless. Managing her will was the only thing that made me feel in control again. But I went too far. I crossed the line between protection and manipulation. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. He turned to his daughter. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Emily looked at him for a long moment, tears streaming silently down her face. The judge exhaled deeply. In all my years on this bench, he began, I've seen people lie, steal, even destroy their own families for greed. But today, I've seen something different. This is not a case about greed. It's about grief and how grief can twist love into control. He looked at Robert. Mr. Hayes, you violated the law. You altered a legal document and withheld the truth from your daughter. That cannot go unrecognized. Robert nodded, resigned. But, the judge continued, I also see a man who is remorseful, who acted out of confusion and pain, not cruelty. And I see a young woman who has the strength to seek justice not with vengeance but with compassion. He paused. So here is my verdict. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Robert Hayes, the judge said solemnly, this court finds you guilty of falsifying legal documents and breach of fiduciary duty. However, in light of your admission, cooperation, and the plaintiff's request for reconciliation, this court will not impose a custodial sentence. Gasps spread through the courtroom. Emily's eyes widened. Judge Daniels continued, instead, you are hereby ordered to transfer full control of your late wife's estate back to its rightful beneficiary, your daughter Emily Hayes. Additionally, you will complete 300 hours of community service at a local youth counseling center to teach others about the consequences of misplaced control and silence. He leaned forward. And one more thing. I want you both to attend family reconciliation sessions. This court believes that justice without healing is incomplete. He set his gavel down but didn't strike it. This case is not just closed. It's a beginning. Emily covered her face, crying softly. Robert hesitated and then stepped forward. Emily, he whispered. For a moment, she didn't respond. But then, she looked up, walked over, and did something no one expected. She hugged him. It wasn't a long hug. It wasn't easy. But it was real. The courtroom, silent moments ago, now felt lighter, like the air had shifted. Even the judge quietly took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes as though something had fallen in them. Outside the courthouse, the reporters waited. But when Emily and her father stepped out, there were no statements, no microphones. Just two people, walking side by side for the first time in years. The world could ask all the questions it wanted. They didn't know it any answers, because some verdicts aren't written on paper. They're written in the way a father finally looks his daughter in the eyes and tells the truth. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about forgiveness. If this story touched you, remember, truth can break hearts, but it can also rebuild them. Subscribe to Sweet Justice for more powerful real-life courtroom stories where law meets humanity and justice finds its soul.